Folks, welcome to Apokalupsis Historia with Brady and Chance, where we will be mainlining the secrets of the universe live on air. Make sure you hold on to your seats and buckle in to the show. So, we're leading off here with a little, tangent. It's still Shakespeare focused, of course, or Shakespeare definitely tangent.
This
related.
is gonna be wandering. We're gonna be all over the place. It is a live chat, and so we may pause to field some discussion or questions. But
And I wanted to also say that, thank you to our Patreons, of course, and the usual gang of commenters who always come and make the channel exactly what we like it to be, a robust exchange and dialectic of ideas. And the if you're looking to become more involved, we're going to say it here, okay? Yeah, you see all these books? You see all these books? It's real tall here, this big stack, and we have a lot to get through, and so we're always looking for other comrades in this endeavor. So hop on our Patreon. We're going to be starting this book club here, and I think the first book we're going to read is not even a book per se; it's in book form, but it'll be really short. We're going to start, and it's part of tonight's topic, but Aeschylus's The Orestia. So that's the first one we're going to be reading up in this upcoming month. And I think I have one other book that will be dropping here soon. I think I'll drop it in the community chat, so take a look at that as I have another idea. I haven't even told Chance yet, but other than that, so come on board. We're becoming the avid readers book club. We want to join together as far as...
hop on.
As, creating this community of, real... deep divers and stay up laters and deep thinkers and great talkers and exchangers. And so, let's just continue all this and
armchair enthusiasts, if you will.
And let's lead the crusade against the TikTok brain, against the Instagram doom scroll, against all that stuff, right? It's something that requires attention. That's where you're listening to these hour-long...
It's an issue with the youth, I'll say that, and I don't think it's just the youth.
We're out here representing, a particular part of the youth that we can maintain a podcast of an hour plus long of discussion, reading, JSTOR.
Shout out to any of my students that do stop by. This will hopefully enrich your brain.
And no, it's been actually, we did some scientific studies. I paid for them.
Brady's making
I had them.
We don't make enough.
We're trying to see if we can get it peer reviewed, and that's like the real gold standard, okay? But it has been shown to improve IQ points by at least 17%. So make sure that you be on the lookout for those studies to be released soon. But without further ado, we are sort of continuing off the last regular episode we released, the Enigma of Philip Sidney.
Right, last two. Yep.
And from this little, this little two-part episode that we did, we were kind of pointing out stuff, and then it just seemed like more interesting stuff fell in our lap, and so we just kept pulling this thread, and
we just kind of want to work it out here. We don't have like a perfect setup presentation, and it might be a little chaotic or even helter-skelter, but try and follow along. See if you can follow our thought pattern. It's not too wacky and wild. But without further ado, we can get rid of all this, mystique. And we're talking about Philip Sidney. We're looking at defensive poetry, but not just defensive poetry. We're going to be looking at all sorts of Sidney stuff. But I want to connect it to John Lyly. And I know a lot of people are going to guffaw and laugh us out the building for trying to suggest something like that, but I think there's good reason to. And it's not just John Lyly. The same kind of phenomena seem to happen in Shakespeare. And Oxfordians have done a lot of really clever work to show that the originals that Shakespeare seems to be building off of, or that Shakespeare may have originally wrote, come a lot earlier than the orthodox dating. That there's a lot of good reason to believe things like Love's Labour's Lost, or even some of the history plays, or Titus Andronicus, that all these had or Hamlet, which we do kind of say, and Lear, that all these had earlier versions in the 80s or even 70s or even 60s in some cases, like with possibly Edmund Ironside. So let us kind of dive into it. And let me see. Let me check my notes to see where we should even start, because it's all going to be so circular, not in the bad sort of fallacious.
Argumentative. It'll just at some point, like I do myself, and it's like, wait, where did I begin this search? And like, what point did I begin?
Maybe more like hero's journey circular. Like a grand cycle. Okay, so I mean, maybe we can start off with.
Because this is where I feel like it started. Is that we were going through defensive poetry. At least just as far as like this recent revelations, or not even quite revelations, but just more expounding on like what would the
I think I know where I want to go with this. I'm gonna give a free shout out to a great YouTube podcast that Brady and I have stumbled upon. It not really anything to do with Shakespeare, but
totally by accident, really.
But if you guys dig philosophy and literature, you should totally check out Essential Salts. He's had some fantastic podcasts. He's a big Nietzsche guy, and if you guys watched our True Detective episode, we have a fair little discussion on Nietzsche, and we're kind of fans of Nietzsche ourselves. We're also fans of Jung, and I'm kind of more the Nietzsche guy, and Brady's more the Jung guy, but those are like two of our favorites, especially in the narrow field of given philosophy. Those are just two of our absolute favorites, and they seem to be two guys that Essential Salts checks out.
But I think he's also from Texas. I want to say.
Yeah, I think
he's like in Austin or something.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay, well, that makes total sense. And shout out to, I think his name's Keegan, but Essential Salt's fantastic. But he has a few episodes that go over some of the great Greek tragedians, and he has one over Aeschylus, he has one over Sophocles, specifically Oedipus. And then he has one over Euripides, specifically the Bacchae, which I don't have here. I have different Euripides plays. But
it's funny because I'd sent to you. I had found this video, this one on Sloterdijk, and I was like, oh wow, like check this out, and you were like, yeah.
And we'll definitely come back to that.
And then you looked at the Orestia, and you're like, bro, no, wait, check this thing out.
Like, which totally different things.
Yeah,
right.
Right. But you instantly connected to the Orestia to. The stuff we had just read in defensive poetry, and thus the John Lyly stuff as well, of course. But
and so the Orestia is by Aeschylus. Aeschylus is like the first Greek tragedian. He's not actually the first Greek tragedian, but he is the one that sort of super popularizes and standardizes and codifies a lot of the dramatic sort of techniques. Like before Aeschylus, the idea is you pretty much only had a chorus and maybe one other actor, and Aeschylus kind of develops that and turns that into 2 or 3 actors, and Aeschylus just heightens it to this level that nobody had ever seen before, which kind of should remind us of maybe Shakespeare or even John Lyly, who's maybe the first great playwright, if not tragedian, of and Marlowe as well, I guess, of England, right? But Aeschylus had a trilogy called the Orestia, and the tragedy, the first one is called Agamemnon, the second one is the Libation Bearers, and the third one is called the Eumenides. And we'll come back to the Eumenides in a second, but I just want to mention Agamemnon. That story is sort of a side adventure to the whole Iliad thing, and it's about Agamemnon's murder. And in this play, it has Clytemnestra do the murder, his wife, and it goes into all sorts of interesting things. But this is the very same Agamemnon that does pop up in Shakespeare in Troilus and Cressida. And so, whether Shakespeare's Philip Sidney or not, Shakespeare does seem to be, versed in Greek culture, Greek myths, Greek history. We don't have to argue how super read he is, but it would make sense that maybe Aeschylus is possibly an influence on Shakespeare. But going further, let's look at that third one. What's it called? It's called the Eumenides. And this is a name that I bring up as often as I possibly can, because it's something of a mystery to both Orthodox and non-Orthodox scholars. John Lyly, his best play is called Endymion, and, maybe we can argue whether that's his best play or not. I kind of like Came Past Bay as well. But Endymion's usually regarded as his best play. It is a kind of heightened fancy comedy. In a lot of ways, it feels like a precursor to, say, something like Midsummer Night's Dream. You get a lot of the Euphuist touch, but it's toned down. It's not as campy, if not to make a pun on Camp Haspy, but his earlier stuff like Euphues, the novel or the sequel novel, both of those are super kind of corny, campy, kitschy, over the top. Euphuism, it's really gorgeous, it's really beautiful, but it's also kind of silly and meaningless in a lot of ways. Endymion's like it's a heightened sense of language. It's like sonnets in form, yet most of it is actually written in prose. And then let's see, Endymion itself, people have read it, and almost everybody and their grandmother, when you read it, you think, oh, this has got to be an allegory of some sort. And a guy named Louis J. Halpin, I want to say is his name, from 1849, put out this essay where he's like, guys, Endymion's not only an allegory, I think I can crack it. And furthermore, it's the same allegory that cracks Midsummer Night's Dream. Which, fun fact, and I should have brought my Midsummer Night's Dream. Fun fact, Midsummer Night's Dream quotes Endymion, like, almost ad nauseum. It does it a lot. To the point where, in both my Endymion copy and in some copies of Midsummer Night's Dream, though I don't think the Signet copy, they'll mention that. And scholars have gone to the point of, conjecturing, oh, he must have gotten a print copy, which, may be possible. But some scholars have suggested, like, no, Shakespeare, when he was, like, 15, him and his dad, like, got the horse and buggy tied up and went 12 miles down to Kenilworth so they could go watch the play. And Shakespeare, memorized all those lines so well that 15 years later he was able to whip them out again. And it's like, what in the world? How is that even... And I may be misquoting that it's Kenilworth. It may have been at a different location. But the point still stands that scholars are kind of mystified at just why and how so much Lyly seems to pop up in Shakespeare. And to be fair, Oxfordians have totally jumped on that. Other candidacies of Shakespeare have not latched onto this Lyly connection. And that's kind of... to me, a little, and maybe there's some Baconians out there that have something to say about this, but as far as I know, I don't hear much Lyly talk out of Baconians, because, well, I mean, that would have to mean that Bacon's maybe writing Lyly as early as at the age of 16, which, that's kind of crazy, but, he's supposed to be uber genius, wunderkind, so it's possible, but for the most part, Oxfordians have latched onto this, and they rightly maybe should, because John Lyly from, at least 81, if not 80, and people argue earlier, is documented as being Oxford's secretary. And if we go all the way forward into the early 90s, when we get Harvey and Nash battling in their pamphlets, Harvey seems to drop plenty of jabs at Lyly and seems to mention Oxford a lot. And he references him as Double V. And so it's possible that that's not Oxford. But most Oxfordians read the double V almost, as Oxford, and it's not just them picking from this. They have other reasons to think that, and lo and behold, Harvey's doing the same thing, so maybe there's something to it. But Harvey, he seems to take jabs at double V and his little band of cronies, which seems to include Nash, Green, and Lyly. And so there are many reasons to link Lyly and Oxford. And indeed, Louis J. Halpin came up with his allegory back in 1849, but there were other people that said, okay, Halpin, that's a cool allegory, but you don't have it quite right. And so this guy, George Baker, I want to say, in the 1890s, like 1891, he came out with his own allegory and kind of built on it. And then another guy, R.W. Bond, built on that. But then... there were some other people like B.M. Ward, who was a sort of Stratfordian turned Oxfordian. He's one of the first original great Oxfordians. And then a little bit later, Josephine Waters Bennett, who I'm not sure if she's an Oxfordian or if she's just a Orthodox mainstream scholar, but she's around in the 1940s and a little bit later. And she seemed to suggest that no, like, all these previous people, when they read the allegory of Endymion, they think that the allegory is about Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester, who's, the de facto boyfriend, king, because he's the boyfriend of Queen Elizabeth, that it's all about those two and some intrigue between them. They can't seem to all agree on what the intrigue is, whether it's got to do with the secret marriage to Lettice Knollys in the late 70s, or whether it has to do with possible intrigue with Queen Mary of Scots and her, plot against Queen Elizabeth, and then her, trial and beheading and all that. What exactly it's wrapped around, they're not sure, but it's definitely Leicester and Queen Elizabeth. But then on the back of Waters Bennett is like, no, this is all about Oxford. This is all completely about Oxford, and it's not about Leicester and the Queen, it's about Oxford and the Queen, and it's not about Oxford, it's not about Leicester with Lettice Knollys, it's about Oxford with Anne Vavasor. And, it seems to fit pretty well, but in all cases, nobody seems to be able to pinpoint a super pivotal character named Eumenides. That same name from Aeschylus. Eumenides. And so, to me, if somebody can unravel Eumenides, they can maybe unravel the rest of this. And sure enough, I think I'm getting close to doing that if I haven't already done it. There's probably some, gaps to fill and cracks to sand over, but for the most part, I think we've got it. So let's maybe walk through some of it. But it's all on the back of looking at Greek tragedy and considering the influence of Greek on not just Sidney and not just Shakespeare, but the whole Renaissance era. That we hear so much about Latin. We seem to talk a lot about the Italian and French. But especially in the Shakespeare authorship question, what I seem to think gets overlooked is the influence of Greek. And let's be honest, we're looking at Shakespeare's plays. Maybe some of us are only really worried about the poetry, but I think the large chunk of us really, really care about the plays. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some sonneteers out there, and not that I don't care about the sonnets or Venus and Adonis or any of that, but it's the plays that really wow me, and the plays are really what gets me going in this discussion. And who are the first writers of plays? Who are the ones that we go back to and herald as the great playwriters, the great tragedians? It's the Greeks. No shame to Seneca, but Seneca doesn't get taught in high school like Oedipus does. Sophocles is still the king. So on that note, let me see where I want to go from here. Any notes on that, Barry?
It was just really interesting seeing the this play, because I wasn't really familiar with it. When I'd taken tragedy or drama in college, I think we did the Bacchae, and of course I remember Oedipus, and I don't vaguely remember Antigone, but I don't really remember much about that one. And there was one other one I thought that I'm missing, another Greek play that I remember. Besides, of course,
Aristophanes, the frogs.
No. Oh well, but yeah, this was just a cool one. I wasn't familiar with it all, and then realizing the connection, with Eumenides as just meaning the Furies, and that's just a cool name in of itself anyway. But because I was like I said, we had just started listening to Essential Thoughts, and that's kind of cool. And then this is the one that you picked up on. And then
and so what made me really latch onto that episode is that Essential Salts was really pushing the idea that, look, Aeschylus changes the game. Before him, you almost have people going out there just speaking solo speeches. They're basically called dithyrambics, but you just go out there and you just have somebody give this speech. It literally sounds like what a Shope or a Scald would do, right? It's just the one single orator giving out the story, that's almost how, say, something like Iliad or Odyssey could have been told. But Aeschylus is what develops it into not just the telling, but maybe the showing. And we can't put a price on how incredibly foundational and game changing that whole thing is. And it's not just that; it's when he starts it out. it's not just adding these dramatic techniques. He's on this linguistic level, totally raising the bar. And so his early stuff, it's incredibly poetic and filled with figurative devices, which this should sound familiar, right? When we get early stuff like Lyly, the euphuism, it's filled to the brim with figurative language, filled to the brim with figurative devices. But as Aeschylus' career goes on, which those trilogies, that trilogy was written, like, one was really early, one was in the middle of his career, and one was really late. You can see the transition of his career through that trilogy itself. And by the last play, none of that, figurative devices or anything's there. It's all this super psychological realism, maybe with some, like, structural devices. It's a whole lot less about the linguistic on the sentence or word level, and much more about this, creating a sense of reality and depth in characters and all that kind of modern idea that we have about, what literature should be, like in our movies and our plays and our novels, right? And I'll be damned if that's not the same exact career arc of Shakespeare, or just Renaissance English literature in general,
Here's one other thing as well in Eumenides. I just forgot this one. She responds to setting up a trial for him in Athens on the Areopagus. So there's another Philip Sidney.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you. Totally forgot about the Areopagus. I totally forgot
it too. But if you follow Chance's line of reasoning that Eumenides could be a stand-in for a character in Endymion, and who, if anything, in defense of poetry, Sidney is referencing the Furies here, and he also references with Landino,
which we'll come back to that.
So Sidney is also directly referencing Aeschylus, because when he mentions here, he goes, I like this, where he goes, nature brings, making things either better than nature brings forth, or quite anew, forms such as never were in nature, as the heroes, demigods, and then he starts listing some, fanciful stuff, cyclops, chimeras.
These are all Greek things.
And then are those the most famous ones? Those are pretty famous, I'd say. What's the next one? Maybe Phoenix would be like, next more famous, or they're still like Hydra. But he chose
Titans.
Chose to go with Furies.
Yeah, Furies is where he ends it on.
And then he brings it up again later on. So we have Sidney directly referencing Aeschylus. Maybe Chance has a reasoning that maybe if you do the internal reading that he is Eumenides.
Yeah.
The Furies.
Yeah.
Because he likes literally bringing up the
Furies. And we'll work it to that. We'll slow roll people. Let's see.
Then his group is called Areopagus.
So, Philip Sidney's little group, the Sidney Circle, he has a group of writers, which I guess turns into the Wilton School, or the Wilton Group of Writers, which just circles around his sister. But when Philip's alive, pre-86, the term that seems to be given to that group is called the Areopagus. And the Areopagus was a certain rock that was in Greece, and it was this very prominent, important place. Translated as the Hill of Ares. But that Areopagus pops up in which play? Aeschylus's The Eumenides. So maybe Philip Sidney gets this name Areopagus because he read Aeschylus. It's just possible. Okay, the Eumenides. Let's talk a little bit about Eumenides in the play Endymion. So we got a bunch of characters, and we could go through trying to figure out the allegory for each character, and maybe we'll get around to that at some point. But if we look at the characters, we got Endymion. That's the main character, a young man, and then the second character listed is Eumenides, his friend.
Oh, he's so in the print that you have, he's second listed.
Yeah, because they list women at the end.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because clearly, Cynthia, the queen, aka the moon, is the other main character. It's all about Endymion, who's this princely type figure who has this great, beautiful girlfriend, Tellus. But he can't help but be in love with this queen figure that's this goddess who's literally the moon. And so Endymion was a Greek myth that's all about this man that falls in love with the moon. And so Endymion, the prince, is probably Leicester, right? like, yes, Oxford had a fling with the Queen. So did Edward Dyer. So did Chris Hatton. So did a whole load of people. But, like, who is her pretty much de facto husband from the start? Who's the one that people posit as the possible father of Robert Devereux? It's the Earl of Leicester. And so let's just go with that for a second. That quite possibly Endymion is the Earl of Leicester, and that Cynthia is the queen, right? Okay, so Eumenides, that's his friend. At some point, Endymion, even though this girlfriend Tellus is so great and stuff, she ends up getting pretty mad and sour about the whole thing, because, Endymion doesn't seem to be paying much attention to her. And so she gets this crazy witch doctor lady, Dipsus, to do some bad stuff and poison Endymion. Endymion falls asleep, and he's asleep for like years and years. Maybe it's like 7 years. I forget the exact number. It's probably relevant, and I shouldn't goof on that. But Endymion's only able to wake up because this Eumenides character is able to go to this magic well and basically like make a wish and wish him alive. But here's the thing, when Eumenides goes to do that, the big conflict of the story is that Eumenides has this lady, this lady friend of his, Semele, that like they can run away and live together and be happy and forever, and all he has to do is...
Semele's Dionysus' mom, right?
Yeah, and Semele is not in Aeschylus, but it is in... and it may also be in Aeschylus, but it's in Euripides, the Bacchae, because the Bacchae is all about the coming of Dionysus to Greece, and Semele is Dionysus' mother, so she plays a prominent role, and maybe there's some symbolic underpinning behind that name as well. Yeah.
But what were you saying about her, though, coming in?
And so Semele is the one that Eumenides is like deadly in love with, and he just wants to be with her, and he could just, all right, screw Endymion, he's done for it. It was his fault this whole time anyway. He probably should have just never pined for the moon, because you can't marry the moon. Just go be with your girlfriend, Tellus, and, you're going to piss off the moon, but what are you going to do about it, You got to live your life, man. But no, Endymion goes and falls in love with the moon, tries to get what he can't, but, who can blame him? It's the moon. And so Eumenides is stuck with this horrible conflict. Like, what do? I want to do both. I can't do both. I got to pick one. What's he do? What's the classic age-old adage that we've had since language has come? Before hose. Thank you. This is my man right here.
Scientifically proven.
And so, yeah, Eumenides says bros before hoes, and in the wishing well, says, I wish Endymion was better, and they're able to get to break the magic spell. I forget exactly how. Maybe it's from the wish, maybe it's an antidote. But they're able to break the magic spell, and Endymion comes back, and everybody's happily ever after kind of thing.
I don't know if there's a lot of those well tropes and Sleeping Beauty type motifs.
Yeah.
But this seems like a sort of... I know there's a lot of well and stuff in that sort of Celtic, Brittonic lineage, and so it seems like a lot of Greek stuff mixed.
Yeah, we're getting a syncretic mix, maybe, right?
Yeah.
But let's think about that name Eumenides for a second. Anyway, the name Eumenides can be a pun on well-wisher. Like,
here, try to scoot. I want you to scoot your mic a little closer for me. Yeah, they don't. Their name doesn't start as that though.
And so the name Eumenides literally means to speak good things. So the Greek root eu, like euphoria or utopia, means good, right? And so Eumenides is to speak good things or say good things, or to wish someone well, right? Or almost a well-wisher, right? But well-wisher, it's a pun, someone who wishes on a well.
Exactly, yeah.
So right here we have somebody, whoever it is, whether it's John, Lyly, Philip Sidney, Edward DeVere, whoever it is, has such a clever understanding of Greek that they're making puns on the name. And Brady happens to have a quote, maybe not exactly handy, but Brady has a quote that shows that Philip Sidney was extraordinarily good at Greek. And we have an essay showing that Sidney surely was able to translate Aristotle's Poetics himself for the defense of poetry. And we also know that Sidney himself just loves puns. In his own Lady of May, he has a super, pseudo-erudite character in Master Rhombus. Rhombus is itself a play on the name Peter Rhombus. But rhombus being this geometrical shape has all these other connotations to it. But yeah, Sidney's he loves his puns, and we see it all over the Arcadia. We see it over and over in everything Sidney touches. He loves his puns. There's all sorts of different figurative devices. I can't think of any of them off the top of my head because I'm dunce. But all sorts of figurative devices that are pun related that. Not just Sidney, but there's another person of the era that absolutely loves puns. In fact, seems to be three particularly. Sidney, Lyly, and Shakespeare. They love their freaking puns. In fact, that's what Dr. Samuel Johnson said was Shakespeare's giant flaw, was that he would ruin a beautiful scene just so he could make a silly pun. And I think we see that all over Sidney. Like, there's a few sonnets in Astrophil and Estella where it's supposed to be the super heartfelt, beautiful poem about heartbreak and stuff, and he's dropping, wiener and vagina puns in there. And it's like, what are you doing, dude? But that's Philip Sidney, man.
No, and so I'm reading, this biography on Sidney by Catherine Duncan Jones.
Which
book comes out in like the early 90s.
I know Oxfordians hate Catherine Duncan Jones, but she does know her Sidney pretty good.
And so for this little tidbit, as far as knowing Greek, because I know I've seen recently some Stratfordian arguments that Stratford could have learned Greek at his little grammar school or whatnot, where I would think if you're in an alternative camp, like an Oxfordian, like a Sidneyan, you would think that whoever is writing Shakespeare, or the influential parts of Greek, probably knows that in and out, right?
Yeah.
They're spinning new words up on the on the spot.
Right. It's not just some standard baseline grammar education. And if everybody's education was as good as they say Stratford's was, then we would have had a whole nation of poets and playwrights. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. But continue. You got the quote yonder.
So it just says, I have this little tidbit here, and this sounds, just take into consideration what we just said about the logistical probability of Shakespeare being really good at Greek, and then listen to this biography bit here, and it just says, an even more remarkable scholar-printer, the French humanist Henry Estienne, Henricus Stephanus, met Sidney in Heidelberg, Strasbourg, and Vienna, and paid the high compliment of dedicating his edition of the Greek New Testament to him in 1576. On their second meeting in Strasbourg, he gave him a collection of Greek maxims penned by himself, which regrettably does not survive, she says. This probably consisted of selections from his Apothemata Graeca, printed in 1568. Estienne, probably the most distinguished Greek scholar of his own or any generation, says Duncan, praised Sidney's intellectual growth between their three meetings, and anticipated that he would appreciate the physical appearance of both the handwritten and printed Greek, as well as grasping its meaning. Whether Sidney went to much expense to secure the attachment of Estienne, we do not know. Estienne's claim that Sidney's Greek was so good that he had no need of translations seems exaggerated, and it is a little surprising that such a significant work as Estienne's edition of the New Testament should be dedicated to a 21-year-old Englishman who as yet lacked aristocratic status. So here's Sidney, as far as because I know Oxfordians like to say that Oxford has lots of dedications, and I'm pretty sure that's true, but it's like,
Sidney's not devoid of them.
I always point out things like, hey, Shakespeare's called the Bard. Bard is a Welsh term. Who gets the history of Wales dedicated to him? Oh yeah, it's Sidney. Who's the guy who gets Greek stuff named dedicated to him, and literally has the most renowned Greek scholar of his or any generation literally says, dude, yeah, like,
this guy is fantastic at Greek. I first met him, barely knew this stuff. Now he's good enough that he doesn't need translations. He can translate all of it on his own. Guy's a genius. He's only 21. He's not even a rich dude, and this guy is fawning over him. What is the deal? What is the deal? My bad. Check, mic.
So you think that the person who's really inundated with Greek might be pulling out some Greek deep cuts here, right? Like,
yeah.
Some Eumenides drops and the like, perhaps,
And so let's think about that.
And she also, just to reiterate, she does actually provide more examples of what you said about pun names in the Arcadia, and she says, look at this person in his life that does X or Y. They kind of have this, career or this, trope about them, and look how they kind of show up in the Arcadia, and their name's like a very interesting Greeky, Latin-y spin.
Oh yeah, you were saying the one on like a guy being a barber or something.
Yeah, I can't remember which one. I could go through it, but yeah. And she even says, Philip Sidney's the one who loves name games. And yeah, I have way more on the name stuff later because we're trying to get into the psychology of Shakespeare or even the scene in general.
Right.
If there is anything to all these names, if you think that Oxford is Othello, if you think blah 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 is yada yada, then this is all fair game in my mind. So yeah, connecting all the Greek stuff to all this seems the most logical progression here. So
right, and so there are so many names in the era. Like almost all of Lyly's plays are completely Greek influenced or Greek named. Midas, Galatea, Campaspe, Sappho, Phao, all of it Greek. Let me just point that out. And did John Lyly know Greek? We don't know. We do know that Sidney was, a savant at this stuff. So let's talk about some of these. And it's not just Lyly, right? Shakespeare, Midsummer Night's Dream, completely set in Athens. Timon, completely set in Athens. Troilus and Cressida, completely set in Troy. These are all completely Greek places, and there are other ones that have Greek stuff kind of ram-jammed into the names. And so let's also remember, Philip's name himself is Greek. Another person with a Greek name, Penelope Rich, totally Greek name. So yeah, it's Greek influence. May be part of why he gets into it. But let's go back to Eumenides for a second, and let's see why I'm so hyped up about it. So Louis J. Halpin first suggested the Leicester reading, and he said, look, this Leicester reading not only works with Endymion, it also works with Midsummer Night's Dream with Oberon and Titania. Same pair. Same little conflict happening.
It even seems in the basic wiki that they'll admit, a lot of connections between it. Between, influences at least.
Yeah. And, most obviously on Love's Labour's Lost and Midsummer Night's Dream. I wonder if we can find any Philip Sidney connections with those plays.
Even this one says is widely recognized, to a large allegorical extent. Cynthia representing Elizabeth. And, someone probably being Endymion, perhaps Robert Dudley.
And so we get Louis J. Halpin says, look, it's we got this must be about Leicester and the Queen. But then later on, Baker adds to that, and he's like, it's about Leicester and the Queen, and it's about Latus Nollis and this marriage, and he even goes to the point of suggesting all these people that would have surrounded Sidney, but Baker never says Sidney himself. He never says Sidney. He never suggests maybe Sidney's Eumenides or any character. He just never says his name. That's weird to me because Baker suggests, look, this is probably happening in 79 or 80 before it would have been registered in any of the registers where we don't find it. So if it's around in 79 or 80, it makes sense why we don't find it in the registers.
Which is kind of funny because, I'm just reading this biography of Sidney here, and at least Duncan's even saying, like, oh, Lester can't wait to show off Sidney and get him to do this and get him to do that. So it just seems like, to spot out Lester in this whole thing.
Sidney's writing the Masque for the Queen called Lady of May in 78. In 81, he's writing the Masque for the Queen called Four Foster Children of Desire. And he's doing that largely not just for the Queen, but to get Lester's ideas through to the Queen in this clever, kind of chivalric, literary way. And what is Endymion but not that? What is Endymion but not a ploy to get the Queen to think something? This isn't a play for the public. This is a play for the Queen. And so, as much as Baker kind of nails maybe the dates, and maybe he doesn't, maybe it's too early. 79 seems pretty early. He never suggests Sidney, even though that's exactly when Sidney's writing, those masks. That's exactly when Sidney writes his letter to the Queen saying, please don't marry that French guy. Well, let's look at Midsummer Night's Dream real quick. Even Oxfordians, like one of my favorites around right now is a YouTube channel called Context Shakespeare. And it's run by a lovely lady named Claire, who's from England, I want to say. She has a lot of videos where she does a deep dive into one specific play and looks into all the sources and looks into maybe a lot of allegorical meanings or, coy references that reference actual biographical incidents. And so her huge pitch about Midsummer Night's Dream is that this is all clearly making fun of the French marriage. That Nick Bottom, who gets turned into a donkey and gets to make love to the Queen because the Queen is under the potion spell, that's all super duper making fun of the French marriage. And I totally agree with Claire on that. That's exactly what this is about. And she points out all these references that show, like, look, this has to be true. There's all these little nicknames that are used in the play that reference the actual nicknames that she would use for the French prince, which she had a weird relationship, Queen Elizabeth did, where Queen Elizabeth, she likes this guy fawning over her, and he's this super ugly guy that's way younger than her, but she seems to enjoy this relationship. Yeah, there we go. And it's one of her earlier ones. But Queen Elizabeth clearly is not actually going to marry this guy. It's a little... Yeah, she has two parts, actually. She's clearly not going to marry this guy, and she doesn't. But it's Sidney that seems to always be the one against it. And so Claire in her video pitches, hey, Oxford's buddies with Duke d'Alençon, the guy that's supposed to be marrying the Queen. Maybe he's the one making fun of him. But to me, that doesn't make too much sense, because that's the same guy that Sidney maybe was gonna, fight Oxford over and about, because Sidney's constantly foiling the French marriage, which Oxford and Cecil and Sussex are supposed to be huge proponents of. And so it doesn't make too much sense to me to suggest that Oxford is going to be making fun of this guy that he's supposed to be a huge proponent of.
Yeah.
Like, he literally...
How do Oxfordians resolve it? Do they...
That it's all just kind of fun.
Would they have been happy if the marriage went through? Like, is that... They're like, oh, too bad that didn't happen.
I
don't think
so. I think any English-speaking person, loves worshipping Virgin Elizabeth, and maybe that's including me. But, also, I don't know, they also couldn't have their Tudor Prince theories as much either, if that happened, maybe. Or maybe they could use that part of their... Who knows? I won't even speculate on that. But I guess the point for me is that, if Oxford's willing to make fun of the French prince, and then we're able to say that, no, it's all in good fun, why are we not able to do the same thing with Philip Sidney, But, furthermore, I don't think that that's what's happening. I don't think that that's possible. I don't think that Oxford can have that pro-marriage position and still put forward this pretty scathing, he literally turns the dude into an ass. And, Nick Bottom is totally the punchline of the entire play. He's literally and figuratively an ass. And so, who might do that, maybe? Maybe it's the only guy that got away with speaking out against the French marriage, which is Philip Sidney. You know, there's other people that tried to write letters or wrote pamphlets. You know what happened to those people? They literally got rounded up and got their hands cut off. So, Philip Sidney's not the only one to speak out against it. He's the only one to get away with it. He wrote her this giant, 10, 20-page letter, just filled to the brim with all these erudite arguments and references to classical stuff, saying these are all a million reasons why you should never marry that French prince. And what an incredibly presumptuous thing to do, but hey, that's what happens when you shake the spear against the will of Athena. I'm just going to say it like that. You know what I'm saying? Who more is shaking the spear against the will of Athena than Sidney writing that letter to the queen? Okay, so let's think about that. What's that got to do with Midsummer Night's Dream? Well, not just that it's making fun of the French prince, or the French Duke d'Alençon, but that it's also clearly allegorizing the whole making fun of him and the whole wielding this stuff against Elizabeth. Who is Oberon if not Leicester? Who is Puck if not Sidney? Sidney is doing the machinations of Leicester. Puck is doing the machinations of Oberon to teach the queen a lesson. Isn't that what everything that Sidney has ever done for Leicester is to teach and get an idea across to the queen? And isn't that what he largely says in Defense of Poetry? That's the whole great thing about drama and poetry, that you can teach tyrants to not be tyrants, and you can teach people how to deal with tyrants and all sorts of stuff like that. Those are all just messages to Queen Elizabeth in some form or fashion. So let's just talk about the name itself. Okay. Eumenides. I have this board here. I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up or not.
Let me switch my camera angle real quick.
Yeah, there we go. Getting a little bit of a glare, but there we go. Eumenides. It's a perfect anagram when transliterated back to English, where the mu turns into an M, the sigma turns into an S, the iota into an I, the delta into a D, the nu into an N, and then our two epsilons and our eta into an E, all condensing into one E, and then our upsilon into a Y. Those are exactly what the letters are in Greek and how they turn into English. That's it. And what is M. Sidney? It's not Mary Sidney, it's Master Sidney, which means that this is from 1582 or earlier. Because in January of 83, Philip Sidney is knighted, so he becomes Sir Philip Sidney, and he would no longer be called Master Sidney. And if you think I'm making this up, go ahead and Google Philip Sidney letter or Philip Sidney handwriting. See if we can just, I don't know, off the top of our heads, see if the dude ever signed his name as M. Sidney. Because if he didn't, maybe I'm making this up. Go look through some pictures. Let's see if we can find one. And let's see. You have to zoom in a little bit. I can't see a dang thing. There it is.
This one?
Yeah.
This one?
No. Go back to that one. Yeah.
Alright, let me try to see if I can blow it up. This right here?
Yep.
M. Sidney?
Yep. M. Sidney. Master Sidney. And we can find that over again. There's several letters with M. Sidney. And so, it just seems to me that maybe there's a reason to suggest Sidney is Eumenides. But what are the Eumenides themselves? We talked about that the name means well-wisher, one who speaks good things. But it's specifically a nickname or a name of the, I'm going to butcher this, but
Irenaeus?
Yeah, the Irenaeus.
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 Uranus.
Uranus. Man, yeah, I was trying to look at this one too earlier.
And you can see why they came up with a nickname. They're like, this isn't going to work. We need a nickname. So like, let's also call it the Eumenides. But the Eumenides are almost a euphemism of the Furies, because the Furies, they're like, almost the breath or the wrath of the gods. And
justice or whatever.
Yeah, they're the fist of justice. They're the righter of wrongs. They're the vengeancers. But they're a body. They're a collective. But the Eumenides is a way of like sort of euphemizing that idea that they're not just the wrath. They're the things that make good things happen. Let's see, literally the gracious ones is what it says there, or kindly ones. So it's the positive aspect of it. But what they are is they are the divine fury of the gods. And so, divine furies, where does that line pop up in Sidney? Let's see. We see it here, where he lists all these mythical creatures, but we'll see it later in his conclusion. And in his sort of conclusion paragraph, he has this big list of all the reasons one can like poetry. And he's pretty much summing up his entire essay with all the things that he's listed. And he's like, look, you can agree with so-and-so, whether it's Aristotle, or you can agree with so-and-so, whether it's Scaliger, or you can agree with so-and-so, like Clausurus, or, Bimbus, all these esoteric, deep-cut thinkers who had ideas on what literature and fiction should be and poetry should be, and they have all these differing reasons that all sound like really good reasons. But Sidney undercuts that. He's not saying that he necessarily says those are the exact reasons. He's just saying those are a bunch of possibly good reasons. Because he says at one point that you can also, instead of agreeing with those points, you can agree with himself, Philip Sidney himself, that there are many mysteries contained in poetry which of purpose were written darkly, lest by profane wits it should be abused. So that poetry is almost this sacred mystery thing itself, that it needs to be couched in esoteric thought and deep meaning, and like it itself needs to be this kind of puzzle to crack. And if it's not that, profane wits are going to abuse it. And probably even if it is that, profane wits are going to abuse it, right? And you'd think that that's where he would end this statement, right? He lists off all these reasons, but at the end of the day, you can agree with Philip Sidney that this is the point. But no, he kind of sneaks it in because he puts two more points after that. And why in the world wouldn't he just list his at the final? Why did he set these two off after his point? What made them get this privileged position of this final exclamation point at the end of this concluding paragraph? Well, let's see. It's even part of the same sentence. He uses a semicolon. We're not even in a period. We're still part of this whole same list. You could believe with Landino that they are so beloved of the gods, the poets, that whatsoever they write proceeds of a divine fury. So proceeds of the Eumenides, right? And so that poets are so beloved by the gods, and maybe the gods is itself allegorical or metaphorical here, because, who are the gods when we're writing Midsummer Night's Dream? It's the fairy king and fairy queen, right? Who are the gods in Endymion? It's the moon, the goddess, right? Who is, all these people are Leicester and the queen. They are gods or goddesses when they're fictionalized. And so Philip Sidney is himself the divine fury of the gods or goddesses of Leicester and Elizabeth. He is himself the Eumenides. And if, you don't believe that and you don't like that Philip Sidney may be part of Shakespeare, may be part of Lyly, just remember, you can lastly believe poets themselves
when they tell you that they will make you immortal by their verses. Sounds a lot like Shakespeare talk to me, you know? Okay, so Philip Sidney name-dropping divine fury right after his profane wits reference, to me, is unbelievably, incredibly important. He could have dropped this anywhere in the essay, and I would have said it was important, but he dropped it right after his only point in this 40-page essay where he actually makes his own claim. Every other point in the essay is rhetorical argument where he is, doing the exercise of couching himself within that perspective, but he doesn't necessarily believe that. And pretty much at the end of every time he pitches out an opinion, he says, well, that's at least what so-and-so says, as if to say, I don't necessarily agree with that. But he doesn't necessarily disagree with it either, right? But what we do know for sure that Philip Sidney thinks is that there are many mysteries contained in poetry which a purpose were written darkly, lest by profane wits it should be abused. And it's interesting that he kind of gives us a little tip-off by saying, look, you would abuse it if you quit reading here, but what do I tell you right after that? That poets can be the divine fury of the gods, that people like me can write to do the biddings of Leicester and Queen Elizabeth, and that, we ourselves, when we can, we're going to try and immortalize ourselves and our friends in doing it. Wow, okay. So, kind of come full circle here. There's maybe a lot of places we could go more in depth to this, but let me just mention, in case you didn't like the Midsummer Night's Dream connection, Lyly himself has the man get turned into the donkey device already in Midas.
And is that not just the golden? It's just the golden ass trope.
Yep.
All over, right?
Yep. And that's literally what's happening in the story. Is King Midas gets turned into an ass, and when he does, it's because there's this sort of little battle of wits between Apollo and Pan, the two gods, and Apollo and Pan are kind of arguing who's the better god of art. And you got Apollo as the music and different types of poetry, whereas Pan is he's the god of pastoral poetry. He's the god of pipes rather than the lyre. And so you get kind of these two competing schools of thoughts, which to me may be allegorical for the competing thoughts of the so-called Oxfordian school that's maybe more pro-euphuist, and the Sidneyan school that wants to maybe meld that euphuism with a more natural English and a more romantic type structure and setting. But I don't know how much I believe in all that anyway. That said, you see that exact scenario pop up in Sidney's Arcadia in Book 2, where he's got these two shepherds that sit there and have that same argument about Apollo and Pan. It's like, wait a second, I've seen this before. This is in Lyly. And maybe one more thing that I want to mention with all this.
Don't forget, I guess Bacchus is also a divine fury representation too, right? He's kind of a retribution that sort of happens, or at least he kind of brings it. I don't know if that's just, that could just be a god trope.
Just a general Greek tragic trope, but
he's
still.
He's still a divine fury. He's very a static state and all that
yes,
stuff. Yes,
absolutely.
Right? Remember, like I said, his mother is Semele, and that just happens to be Eumenides' girlfriend or whatever his love interest in that play, in the Endymion play. So it's another little slight connection between the divine fury name
and
itself,
specifically, Semele is the herald. She's the mother, but in that sense, she's the herald or the harbinger of Dionysus, this new god. And Dionysus, his wrath and fury only happens to non-believers, to people that can't see the truth. And I don't know, I find that theme especially potent in this Shakespeare authorship question, where every single one of us have our own kind of belief, and we think that everybody else can't see the truth. And ironically, in that story, the guy that gets kind of terrorized and ruined by the end of the thing, he's the one that's supposed to be he's supposed to be the rational skeptic that's like, no, wait, let's use our brains about this. Let's not all jump to conclusions. And no, he was the one that was wrong, and he's the one that got punished. And I find that Sidney would find that theme so incredibly potent, because as much as Sidney's a fan of all this rationalistic argument, he doesn't go as far as someone like Bacon, where Bacon would be like, no, screw that, I am Pentheus, and I'm the real god. Dionysus is the crony, he's the fraud. Me, Pentheus, the real skeptic, I'm the one that can see the world for what it is. Whereas Sidney always kind of jumps back to that almost postmodernist, Erasmian kind of sense of play, where it's like you don't actually know what's going on. Maybe even Heraclitus, right? Like, just you don't really actually know what's going on. It's all this kind of giant game. Your certainty is only so much, and so at some point that's him saying there's other forms of belief. There's deeper meanings. It's not just this surface rational thing. You got to go to this deeper level, and so I could see why that might have some influence on him. Maybe it's a stretch, maybe not. But I do want to mention one more thing before we're done here. That I mentioned a mask, Lady of May, but there's also another mask that he does in 81 called Four Foster Children of Desire. And I even have an essay that's linking Four Foster Children of Desire to Midsummer Night's Dream. And because of this essay, there's been a lot of scholars that have gone out and said, yo, Four Foster Children of Desire sounds just like Lyly. And in fact, there's like kind of two voices in it. That you have this one voice that's clearly just Sidney. It's 100% Sidney. But that voice is representing Sidney and Greville. Which they're the two actors in this mask. There's two more actors because they're the four foster children, right? The two other actors are Philip Howard, Earl of Arundel, and Frederick Lord Windsor, who are both cousins of Oxford. But the voice representing them, that's the super Lyly sounding one. That's got to be the Lyly ghostwriting. But there's been some people who said, no, this whole thing's ghostwritten by John Lyly, and we know that he writes plenty of masks later in the 90s after he's done writing plays. He still writes entertainments for the Queen. So this has got him all over it. But no, like, plenty of scholars have shown this is absolutely Philip Sidney doing his voice. The other voice is also Philip Sidney. He's changing the voice to represent the two other guys who him and Fulk Greville are going against. He can't have the same voice represent both of them. So he's got to have the Sidneyan voice for the one crowd, and he's got to have the Euphuist voice for the other crowd. And I can hear the Oxfordians in the background saying, well, dude, that's Oxford writing that one. And as much as I would love to link Oxford and Sidney and say, hey, yeah, shoot, they're co-writing this together, and that's what Lyly sounds like. No, Oxford wasn't there for that mask or entertainment. He wasn't present. He wouldn't be writing for these four dudes and not come to the mat. Like, no, it's all Sidney. And once we realize it's all Sidney, we have to thereby flip the question. Instead of saying, did Lyly ghostwrite this one stupid mask? We need to now ask, wait a second, is there any reason to see Philip Sidney in John Lyly? And, well, shoot, I've just shown a bunch. And it's not just that. Like, you go look at the letter to the Queen. There's so much verbal, linguistic, diction, syntax overlap between the letter to the Queen and Endymion. You'll see the phrase inward eye. You'll see the phrase, you'll see Alexander get referenced, which, Campaspe, Lyly's first play supposedly, is literally about Alexander. And so you'll see that, like, there's so much overlap between Lyly and Sidney. It's kind of weird and scary. And furthermore, there's only two writers at that time that you can really go back to and dive into fully that have these big bodies of work. Everybody else either lost their stuff or they weren't that big. So, like, maybe there's a body of work that Oxford had, or, if we want to say he is Lyly. I don't know how to resolve that, because at the end of the day, where is John Lyly from? Kent, where's Sidney from?
Which is also going to be relevant to all this stuff you're bringing up. Dude, this is about to...
Yeah.
Dude, this is about to
and
be
so,
crazy.
So Sidney's from Kent, right? Lyly, what year is he born? 54. What year is Sidney born? 54. Where'd Lyly go to school? Oxford. Where'd Sidney go to school? Oxford. Lyly, why does he even have station in life? It's because his grandfather was this great grammarian for King Henry VIII. Sidney, why does he have any station in this world? It's because his grandfather also worked for King Henry VIII and also had a big role in education in the English language. So, I don't know, there's this weird, bizarre overlap. And it's this other weirdness that Lyly's supposed to be buddies with John Florio, and Sidney's supposed to be buddies with John Florio. Yet I can't find a word about Lyly to Sidney or a word about Sidney to Lyly at all. They're like the two preeminent writers of the early 80s. There's nary a word about the other from the other. And I can't understand that. And so it seems to me that maybe a lot of the stuff that we look into Lyly and say, oh, that's a Kent reference, or, oh, that's a grammar school reference. Like, couldn't Sidney be just as capable of making all those himself? Now, I can hear Oxfordians saying, look, dude, you may be Endymion, but the rest of the Lyly, it's all totally Oxford. And I do think a big chunk of the Euphuist novels are not Sidney. Like, there's clearly changes in the Euphuist novel. Like, there's parts in the section where it's got all these letters. A good chunk of those letters read differently than the rest of the book. And it's not this campy, kitschy sort of Euphuist stuff. It's more serious and it sounds more like Endymion. That's the Sidney parts. Now, did Sidney write the more Euphuist stuff? I don't know, from that Four Foster Children of Desire. It sounds possible. But I have looked into the Oxfordian arguments for why Oxford could be in Lyly, or why Oxford is writing the songs in Lyly. And I'm more compelled by the songs argument than writing most or all of Lyly. I'm not seeing it myself. It seems a backward circular argument saying this looks like Shakespeare and Oxford's Shakespeare, so it must be Oxford's writing Lyly. But some of the songs, Oxford seems to be a songwriter. I kind of see that. Seems to be this lutenist lyrist that also can write songs for lutenists and lyrists. And seems like maybe he did write a big chunk of the songs in Lyly, but those are just the songs in Lyly. Those are just parts. And let us also remember that Sidney in the Arcadia has plenty of songs, and Astrophil and Stella has plenty of songs. Sidney himself can write songs. So maybe that's where we'll end it tonight, but you guys gotta...
Oh, wait, I got more, though.
Okay, we're not in
yeah,
it.
so I have this whole weird tangent, because I'm going to connect it to a bunch of different stuff that we've specifically discussed here on this YouTube channel. Yeah, so this is Rain Crazy Brady territory here now, but you just reminded me because, yeah, realizing that Lyly is from Kent is going to maybe hammer home some of this stuff. So, of course, in our... around here, we were connecting the stuff about Divine Fury and Dionysus and all this stuff or whatever, right? There is another character that we've talked about in the Shakespeare realm, as far as name goes, that also his name literally means Divine Fury, right? Or literally has that part of his package, if not literally his etymology.
Okay.
And that's going to be Odin again, right?
Okay.
So yeah, Odin is definitely the god of divine fury, literally the proto-dramatic Wotan from Woad or Woth, literally divine fury, ecstasy, madness. Similar concept or whatever here again, right?
Right. And so, from whence we get the term Woat, like God Woat or God Wot, which is a phrase that in our Passionate Pilgrim video, I attribute that to Philip Sidney, because Philip Sidney himself uses the phrase God Wot.
Damn. Okay, and so...
And yeah, why might some guy from Kent use that phrase,
And
right?
we were saying that, okay, Sidney is definitely referencing Aeschylus.
Yes.
Now, when maybe someone like Sidney...
Who likes his name puns, right?
Who likes his name puns, looking at a Greek word like Aeschylus, first little thing you see here is A-E-S-C. And of course, this may not connect to the Greek root, but it'd be fun as an English pun if you're an English-speaking person.
It's a transliterated pun, much like the name Eumenides.
You literally get to the Aska word in Old English, and this concept of, where I've talked about the Anzu's rune before. It's an old ask.
It's that A-E, yeah.
It's the A-E sound, and there's an old, it's for the old Norse rune and for the old Saxon rune. They have one. There's one that's like a soft O, and there's one for a soft A.
Okay.
But yeah, the ask for the soft A is called ash tree, and it's derived from the old Norse one though for the A. But this is it has to do with the ash tree specifically, which has to do specifically with Odin because it has in with Yggdrasil, and literally the ash or the ah sound has to do with divine breath. It's literally like the process itself. It's the presence of God.
I know we've brought it up in other videos. Brady's last name is Nash, but go ahead and show them the etymology of Nash.
Oh, well, yeah, Nash just means, of the ash tree.
And the ash tree, huh.
And so if you go back to our...
Go back to our... Is there a guy named Nash from the period?
Right.
Yeah, Thomas Nash, right?
And so it's funny that the word games got me into the Shakespeare authorship question because, I saw the name Thomas Nash as part of being potentially an inspiration or at least a co-author of some Shakespeare stuff, and like, oh, that's my middle name and my last name, right? So that's what got me into it. But go watch our Marlowe Odin Decker video because that's when I talk about more of this stuff, and I have the shorts that kind of connect this, so I won't go on about that here. But so just remember that we see Aeschylus, the Greek player, but if you're an English speaking person, you'll see Ask. But I have this book by researcher, an academic. His name is Stephen Paulington. This book that's called The Elder Gods, and he there's another YouTube channel called Uppsala Books, and it's got Tom Shippey's YouTube channel, and he's a big Tolkien
totally
scholar or whatever, right? A big English scholar. So he just has some other books that they're publishing. I've got Stephen Paulington's other book, Woden. That I'll dive into. But Woden specifically, and this book, The Elder Gods of England, is all about the English side of things. So it's not continental German stuff. No. It's not Wotan. It's not Odin. It's anything we find about Woden specifically, right? And as I was reading this book, I got it because I was just super interested in specifically because I was going down to the Nash stuff, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And so Nash comes from the English, and so that's why I decided to go down this particular rabbit hole. But as I kept reading it, in my mind, I'm like, oh, Philip Sidney is from Kent. Just don't forget that. And I kept seeing a couple of different things about Kent that have very big either Odin named places or potentially Ash named places in general. And so I've got a couple of excerpts I have highlighted here, essentially. So where's this one? That's a little sure. Wrong one. Yada, yada, yada. Yeah, okay. So, Baer has argued for a Woden-based cult in the early kingdom of Kent, with its own cult site to rival the Scandinavian Gudme and Upakra, at the location called Wodensburg, fortress or high place of Woden. The skillful use of the existing Woden cult as a stabilizing factor in the process of Kentish state formation seems entirely plausible. Although the direct link between any such cult and the place name remains speculative. But regardless, there's a lot of places all over England itself. But, you'll have Donar's Hill or Thor's this or Thor's Tree or Thor's Glade. And the same thing, you'll have Ash Glade or Ash this or whatever. But in specifically Kent, there's a lot of Ash stuff. There's a lot of Odin stuff. He's even saying there's like a big giant one that rivals some bigger, we talk about Scandinavian Odin, Odin that.
It's Woden's Mecca.
Yeah, we have all these old place names that have been left over that have all these gods' names on them or whatever. So that's the first one we found. I have more notes I need to find this book later on. So here's the thing that goes on about the Ask as potentially a god. Maybe it's Odin related, maybe it's something prior to this. But we'll go into a quote here from Paulington's book. A supernatural being called Ask, Ash Tree, may have been known to the early English. A character of similar name, spelled Osk, still kind of that soft A, soft O sound, which has to do with the mouth and breathing and words and Odin. It always goes back to this concept, so... certainly occurs in the early history of the kingdom of Kent, where the term is a cognomen or a title for one of the better-known figures. Interesting. So some of their early, potential mythic king dudes or figure names have this like Ask or Osk tree, name in like the early, history. So it has been proposed that the name Osk or Oisk is derived from Anskis and is the Old English cognate of the Gothic term Ansis, the half-gods, or Aesir, probably, it's another thing, who are elevated from heroic to divine status due to their surpassing luck. While the phonology looks shaky, the underlying idea is of semi-divine status derived from ancestry, used to bolster kingly power. The word ask in Old English can be used of the tree itself, of its wood, and of things made from its spear shaft and a ship. Like a spear shaft.
Spear shaft, weird.
And once again, Odin the Vikings were called Ashmen because the ash tree is a revered tree for using literally for spears, and Odin is a spear shaking, deity himself, right? So don't forget that. It is also the name of the runic staff Ansus, with the sound value the vowel in cat, which is derived from the Elder Futhark character Ansus, and the sounding value sorry. Place names such as Ascleia, ash tree grove, may have had religious significance if they date from the pre-Christian period. Period, not pyramid. And here we have a interesting little footnote here from Tolkien himself. Ash trees and asker. Alternatively, Hengest and Horsa might be cognonyms for men with different given names. It is interesting that Ashford is still one of the more prominent towns in East Kent, controlling one of the main westward routes.
There you go.
It kind of goes into some more of the stuff, but I think that's all the specific. There's some more Kent relations, but yeah, big giant place called Wordensburg, bunch of known places in Kent. We mentioned it twice in here that Ashford and other things in like their literal whatever lineage that they kind of find Oscar and Ask. And Sidney and John Lyly are both from Kent. That maybe has a name connecting to Divine Fury, the god of Divine Fury, and they both, Sidney's referencing into Vincent poetry, but John Lyly's also using Eumenides, as a main character in his play or whatever, right? So
if we have two different guys, like they're doing a lot, like they're in the same mindscape, like it's crazy. And like real quick while we're talking about Ash. I'm sure Sidney had a lot of teachers, but what was his grammar school teacher's name?
I just learned, that he had a teacher that was traveling with him, and his name was Thomas Ashton. And it just I don't know if Thomas Nash is now Philip Sidney or something. That's not exactly what I'm saying. But it is fun that we know, for current modern examples, the band like Pink Floyd, or you said even Leonard Skinner did the same thing. Like, they're just picking their old gym teachers' names and doing puns or doing like little funny like sounding, or interesting sounding provocative name choices or whatever, right? So,
and like,
it seems totally human. Like, I totally understand like where a lot of this comes from, and I personally feel it myself. It's like, oh, I grew up at that place, and like, oh, that's kind of crazy. Like, that's why I'm even here doing this.
I've always had this idea of doing a noir mystery and writing this noir mystery detective Marlowe, Philip Marlowe style story, but I wanted to do the Raymond Chandler thing, and you got to name it after a poet of the era. And of course, at this time when I came up with the name, I was still a big Oxfordian, so I was like, I got to use De Vere. People don't use De Vere, and that's a cool name, right? And so I was like, okay, but what's his first name? And I wanted to go with the alliterative, euphuistic thing, so I wanted a D name, but I thought like the best, coolest name that I've always loved, and it would fit in totally with this Oxford Tudor Prince reading, is my soccer coach, who was like, that was the teacher that affected me the most. It wasn't an academic teacher; it was my soccer coach, who was a Jamaican Olympian cricket player, but super, super intense Jamaican dude. Older guy, full white beard, still six-pack at age 70 because he got up to run 5 miles every morning at 5. But I wanted to use his name, Delroy. Delroy De Vere.
Yeah.
But Delroy means of royalty, and so Oxford, it's a cool little thing. But yeah, I myself literally have done that. So
right.
Maybe there's something to that, and who's to say that Thomas Ashton didn't also teach maybe some of these other people? These circles are small. Who knows?
Right.
But yeah, just this idea of, okay, we know Sidney likes playing with names. Maybe is that part of the Thomas Nash name? And I know it's like, wait, Thomas Nash, not a Sidney guy, but who's the first one to print Astrophil and Stella? We said it was Samuel Daniel, but no, Samuel Daniel's just another person that got leaked in that printing, and may have been implicated, may not, or may have been part of it. He was implicated, but may have been part of it or not. But the guy that did it was Thomas Nash. Okay, so there is a connection.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like because as far as this is my stake and my claim on the internet here. That I only got interested in Shakespeare because of my own last name, my own sort of like solipsistic,
solipsistic reasons,
like crazy, schizoid reasons. But connecting William Shakespeare, that name itself, to Odin. I mean, even like the subject material, like Hamlet, it's literally like
his greatest play ever is.
But then hopefully honing in and being like, okay, if Shakespeare maybe has to do with Odin, that'd be kind of cool. If since Philip Sidney's my guy, it'd be kind of cool if I find a bunch of like Odin stuff or old ancient Odin stuff, like where he's from, and like lo and behold, it's just like plastered everywhere.
Yeah,
it's like this is starting to get a little. Someone needs to like check me here.
And okay, sure, maybe you find what you look for, but
or to Tom, I'll interview Stephen Pollington. It's like, can you just give me names of all the Odin and Woden? And,
but
let's have a tally count
but like seriously, like you looked at like which place in all of this European, and not even England, but all this European thing, which place is going gung ho over this Woden stuff? It's Kent, England. And sure enough, where's our boy from? Where are both of our boys from? Kent, England. And there's this weird kind of punic coincidence in the name of Aeschylus and the Ask or Ash rune, or the Ash letter, that makes you wonder, might someone like Sidney, who loves these pun names, might he be aware of this and kind of play with it and have fun with it, and might he see some ironic things in it? And so, not saying that Philip Sidney's Nash at all, but that there's this thought process might be happening with someone other than Sidney, or with someone that's friends with Sidney.
This is not just go to the wiki, like go to this letter. Everyone knows this letter. Type it in, like, okay, look, ash tree, blah blah.
Every time you've ever seen the word ether, it's spelled with the cool ask letter because it makes it sound cool.
Because it comes from that root of that breath, that wind, that God's breath that is like instilled, that is literally part of like divine breath or soul or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? But just click on So first thing, I just clicked on the Ansu's rune here in Wikipedia. Boom. Click here, and alright, so now we're on the old rune here that's got all the different iterations. You can see the old Anglo-Saxon one that, even Tolkien's writing with a lot of these runes or whatever. And then right here, now just click on the Proto-Germanic Ansus, and boom, now you're at Aesir, literally. Like, that's what Aesir is. That's what is. It's like gods. Like, that's what the letter almost inherently means. Like,
and then,
it's like
divine
breath.
Here's even some more puns that Philip Sidney could have had fun with. What is it called in Old Norse? Ass.
Yeah, exactly, right?
And so, like, these guys are going to have a field day with this crap.
Ass and ass, for sure, yep. That's the name Aswald and Oswald and all these sort of different names come from, so.
Yeah, man, the bad luck of history if you got Aswald instead of Oswald. Well, Lee Harvey didn't fare much better, but, no bites on Lee Harvey.
My grandfather met the guy who shot him. A little history shout out there.
Yeah, we're not going to connect Jack Ruby to this.
Yeah, my grandfather was approached by him because my grandfather grew up in Cuba. So that's probably maybe explains why he was. Someone thought maybe he had, hey, you want to be a part of something, or something, right?
Yeah.
So, that's. And my grandfather...
Maybe Brady is more connected than we know.
My grandfather said he was working at Sears and that, this guy just kept coming in and talking to him. And that's who he found out who he was. And his wife at the time said, my grandmother said, no, you can't go to his bar or whatever, like his club. So...
Probably good advice.
But, I guess that's all I had for tonight. Yeah, we're going from... Aeschylus and drama all the way to
we never
Odin
did
again.
We never did show the Nietzsche line, so let's come full circle and show the Nietzsche line.
Dude.
That'll tie it all together.
Oh my god, yeah.
Because if you're out there wondering, like, what the heck? Why are you talking about Greek? And why are you talking about Anglo-Saxon? Like, shouldn't we be talking about Italian Renaissance and Chaucer and like what are we talking? Maybe even some Roman stuff. What is all that? But here's what Nietzsche had to say of Shakespeare. So he's talking about the historical sense of things, and I'll
kind of start in the middle of this. We're over on the right-hand side here. But he says, all this determines and disposes unfavorably even towards the best things of the world, which are not their property or could not become their prey. And no faculty is more unintelligible to such men than just this historical sense, with its truckling plebeian curiosity. And so, he says the case is not different with Shakespeare, that marvelous Spanish, Moorish, Saxon synthesis of taste, over whom all ancient Athenian of the circle of Aeschylus would have half killed himself with laughter or irritation. So, this is Nietzsche's way of making critiques of the historical sense of things, and he's definitely a fan of the historical sense of things, which comes about with Hegel and right around dawn of 1800s. But he uses Shakespeare as a specific example. And what two things does he mention in that sentence? Or, maybe more than two things, but specifically Saxon and Aeschylus. And also, interestingly, Spanish Moorish.
Yeah.
He doesn't mention anything about Italy.
I guess Baconians will love this sort of we told you Don Quixote.
Yeah, but no mention of Italy. No mention of France. Aren't those the two places with... No mention of Chaucer here. He says Spanish, Moorish, Saxon, Aeschylus. I'm talking Odin. I'm talking Greek, baby. And, Nietzsche's a crazy guy. Yeah, Spanish and, yeah. And, at some point, it is a great synthesis. It is this big syncretic bundle of all these European ideas from both history and the continental current era.
What do you think about the rest of this line, though, that he says? Finish up the sentence, because even, I think this even harkens to some more stuff.
Okay. And so he was saying that, Shakespeare has this great synthesis, but, Aeschylus and his proper Greeks would have laughed that out the hallway. But, qualification, but we accept precisely this wild motleynness, this medley of the most delicate, the most coarse, and the most artificial. Held a mirror up to nature, my foot, says Nietzsche, with a secret confidence and cordiality. We enjoy it as a refinement of art reserved expressly for us, and allow ourselves to be as little disturbed by the repulsive fumes and the proximity of the English populace in which Shakespeare's art and taste lives, as perhaps on the Chioggia of Naples, where with all our senses awake, we go our way enchanted involuntarily in spite of the drain odor of the low quarters of the town. Wow. Yeah, what a hell of a metaphor.
Yeah, right?
Hats off, Nietzsche. And so, yeah,
I thought he's even talking about, it's just even the product of Shakespeare's time doesn't add up to the environment that it springs out
right.
of ultimately.
And
she's literally saying Duncan Jones is does it make sense to be dedicating this big giant Greek stuff to some backwater of nobody?
Yeah.
Not even we can't even call him Master Sidney yet.
Yeah. And this whole idea that we love reading Shakespeare because we're the heir to this historical throne, right? We get to see the historical ramblings of crazy, people in the past, and we get to feel superior about ourselves. We get to see this big hodgepodge mix of all these different ideas, and we like to think of it as just heightening our sense of modern ideals and ideologies. We don't like to think of it in its historical sense, but both are true. It was true for the historical era of the time. The rabble totally got their feet dirty at that show, and it was to make them laugh. But at the same time, we can still, with this, privileged sense of modernity, sit back and say, we're the heirs and inheritors of the syncretic genius. And so it's this weird thing where we're over and underestimating what Shakespeare is. And maybe that's what this whole Sack argument's kind of built on, is trying to rectify that and even out what we should be picking up and not underrating, and what we should probably calm down and not overrate. And I don't know. Nietzsche's he's his own sense of genius.
Oh, I also have. I'm so sorry. I was totally. I get so wrapped up in my thing. I had one other small thing. There was a recent if you know anything about Odinic imagery, there is the spear dancing image with the two horn. It's a Viking horn helmet, but it's also these are actually supposed to be birds on top of the head, two ravens oftentimes. And so this one's actually, I believe this was actually found in Kent. This is the famous Fingalsham buckle.
I didn't even think about that, but look at what museum it's at.
Yeah, the Ashmole
Ashmole, which is exactly where we got our Philip Sidney manuscript, is from the Ashmole collection.
And recently, supposedly, they found another one, another Odin or Woden spear dancer depiction found in Kent. But I haven't been able to exactly find what's going on with this. You just kind of find it getting passed around the internet, but no one's been able to attest if this is like a real thing. Like there's no press releases or anything, but just some more stuff to chew on. That maybe Kent is turning up a lot more Odin stuff and a lot more Odin connections, and that's just where I'm hitting home this Shakespeare and Odin connection. And now I get to, and Sydney's there again. Like, okay, cool,
right?
Like, excellent. Like, I couldn't wish it to be more.
And I don't know, to keep going with this idea of syncretism, Philip Sidney we know is a champion of syncretism. He himself tried to employ it with the Christian Protestant League. He said, hey, we need to combine our good ideas. But, we're sitting here listening, Philip Sidney, his family is historically Welsh. That's one culture. He grows up in Kent with all this Anglo-Saxon, super, almost Viking-y culture. That's another thing.
It's like some of those may even get proto-Viking.
Actually. Right.
Pre-Christian era.
Yeah, Anglo-Saxon but both, right?
Yeah.
Anglo-Saxon and later Norse Viking, right? So that's three different things. We know Homeboy went over to France and was, super influenced by Languet and Bartholomew's Massacre and that stuff. Okay, we got all the French. We know that he loves Du Mornay, right? Bartholomew du Mornay, the sonneteer in France. Sidney loves that. He's translating himself. Okay, what else does Sidney also... He goes to Italy. He's super influenced by Venice. Doesn't much care for the rest of it. But super influenced by Venice. And maybe is influenced by the rest of it, but not necessarily positively. But regardless whether he went there, of course he's super, super, super influenced by Petrarch. That goes without saying. Petrarch's, the great Italian poet. Or the great sonneteer. So we got that with Sidney. But we also have all this Greek stuff with Aristotle, with Aeschylus. Sidney is, and
we know the Latin's given because
it's not just those. Look, we can go over to Austria and Vienna where he lived for a year, or we can talk about him visiting Poland and almost becoming the king of Poland, and being connected to the Muscovy trading company,
in Russia and all that stuff, and stuff in the New World, of course, too.
Right. So it's everything. It's all we're lacking here is Jewish Kabbalah, and at that point,
No, we got John D's right there. There you go.
Yeah. So, guys, who would have a better?
Yeah, it's just before getting into the Shakespeare authorship question, it's I don't think John D wrote that stuff, but I'd like to figure out how I could get him on the advisory board and boom, he was Philip Sidney's personal family friend and tutor, and predicted his death through a crystal orb. What?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And
said this weird Shakespeare stuff is kind of weird with Odin. That'd be kind of cool if oh no,
right.
Wait a second, I just, I'm supposed to be just a crazy internet person, but...
And so, any of you guys that are big fans of Alexander Wall and the John Dee stuff, John Dee may have written some letters to Oxford, and we may have that. We don't have that, but we may have evidence that happened. But we don't really have actually anything between Oxford and
Dee.
Dee.
If you can find me stuff, because we have stuff from John Dee saying... Philip Sidney, your dad was the best dude that ever lived, and when his dad died, John Dee, I wrote that stuff to the family, and yeah, dude,
right.
I even felt it when he died, we were so close, and he was just such a bro that I felt the disturbance in the force, in the monad, I felt
and Dee goes out of his way to say, look, Sidney was my best and brightest pupil.
Even random biographers seem to just insert that people that should not be making those qualitative statements I've seen in random blogs, and by the way, and the best, his most brightest student. It's is that who are you quoting? Why are you saying that?
Right. And, I mean, it goes along with
that Greek dedication. It goes along with a lot of stuff Sidney was able to do. Like whenever Oxford enters, what is it? Gray's Inn or Middle Temple? I forget which one. I think it's Gray's Inn.
Gray's Inn, yeah. It's got another name, but
Oxford does that at a pretty young age. Guess what? Sidney's doing it 4 years earlier, and so
it's kind of made the analogy of like, imagine you're a freshman and you get drafted onto the varsity team, and you've got to check all these pride of the seniors that maybe they didn't get into their senior year or something.
And you're on varsity squad starting freshman year. It's like Freddie Adu prodigy over here. But like, just plenty of Oxfordians and plenty of Baconians like to kind of hold high the fact that, look, they were in Gray's Inn. They're lawyers. They're attorneys. All this legal jargon that's in Merchant of Venice and stuff like that. Who else but our guy, right? But here's the thing. Sidney himself does the same stuff. And once we're connecting all these other dots, it's like, I'm not saying that Sidney's 100% Shakespeare. By no means. We're still 100% group theorists. Still think that Bacon and Oxford have claims to many parts. Just trying to figure out who is writing what is super important, and we're still diving into just what exactly Philip Sidney could be capable of, when, where, and how. But yeah, I think we need to start at Sidney and Lyly, and I've been continuing to dive through this, and one day I'll have a presentation that almost goes word for word, just picking out figurative language devices that are common between the two, picking out diction and syntactical constructions that are common between the two, picking out thematic ideas, sources, and look, they share so much across the board that we need to probably ask ourselves what's going on. And indeed, once we get to a point where if we're comfortable saying, yeah, Sidney's all over Lyly, we have a real historical conundrum, because Lyly's supposed to be working for the guy that hates Sidney. So what's going on? What is going on indeed? But it seems to me that there's this weird phenomenon happening where Lyly maybe wanted to be part of the Leicester Circle. At the same time that Florio's, getting into the Leicester Circle with first fruits, that's exactly when Lyly's, getting tutored by Florio or buddies with Florio at Oxford. Mightn't Lyly want to get in that circle, but he doesn't seem to be able to. Or maybe he does, but gets kicked out, or maybe he does, becomes an agent or something. I don't know. But on the other side, you have this other guy named Gabriel Harvey, who literally takes pot shots at Lyly and vice versa. Gabriel Harvey, he's always connected with the Leicester Circle and Sidney Circle by academics, but fun fact, he wasn't actually always in the Leicester Circle. Before that, guess what he was trying to do? He was literally trying to become Oxford's secretary. Oxford passes him over and picks Lyly, and Harvey maybe makes some jibes at Oxford because of that, and that maybe is what starts the whole Harvey-Nash war. But, weirdly, Harvey wants to work for Oxford, ends up working for Leicester. Lyly wants to work for Leicester and ends up working for Oxford. What the f*** is going on?
Yeah. Once again, we're about to drop. I'm gonna drop a video that talks about the fun things about plot holes and how there's a concept of hidden writing, and that you navigate weird. That these plot holes maybe lead to a truth underneath it all. That it's like, what is going on
that we have
here?
These paradoxes or contradictions, which
the first plot hole is like Stratfordianism, and then after that, then you're getting into stuff like, and I sort of said like, first, surface narrative, Oxford and Sidney hate each other. And it's like, okay, maybe sure, we have all these narrative little things that are dropped by writers that are sort of like, people that are friends with poets that make stuff up.
Yeah.
And then plot holes, it's like, but if Oxford's a folio, why dedicate it to people that have the namesake of his mortal enemy? Why do their families get intermarried? Why does, they seem to, why?
Similarly, Mariana over on the Florio channel has been pitching this big pitch of hers, and she's got some stuff going with it. I won't dismiss it outright. But her big pitch is that Nash and Florio have this war with each other that's like ongoing for a decade, and no one seems to have pointed it out. And like maybe the heart of that can like get to the heart of Shakespeare. But for me, it's this weird thing where Nash is connected to both Sidney and Oxford, and Florio's connected to both Sidney and Oxford. because Oxford's supposed to be tied at the hip to Henry Wriothesley circa 1593 with Venus and Adonis. That's exactly when Florio is Henry Wriothesley's tutor. What is going on? But like, Nash is supposed to be tied at the hip to Oxford, but he's over there putting out Philip Sidney's poetry and maybe even chumming it up with Mary Sidney a little bit, or going to war with Mary Sidney. He's still not sure. And so, like, what is happening at this ground level, and how much of it is dependent on this whole Oxford-Sidney feud or narrative of a feud? Can we unravel what is happening here? Because it seems to me that plays into not just the Harvey Nash pamphlets, but you can keep going.
Yeah, War of the Theater somehow,
that Harvey
right?
Nash stuff disappears in 96, 97, and then 98, Marston and Hall pop up.
And let's not forget Gunpowder Plot. Let's not forget Essex Rebellion.
Let's also remember that Marston and Hall pop up right when they start burning Nash. Right when Nash gets banished and pretty much excised from history and censored from history is right when Marston and Hall pop up. Right after Marston and Hall pop up, Ben Jonson and Marston are at war, and then Decker's in it, and then, I don't know, maybe Shakespeare's in it, maybe Middleton and Chapman get their... Like, what is going on here? If we could possibly get back to the heart of where all this conflict starts, because it all seems to be connected and growing out of the same thing, even though, oddly, after a few years, the names, like, shift and rotate to new names, right? Like, we started out talking about... Florio, Harvey, and Nash, and by the end of it, we're talking about Decker and Johnson and Marston. Is that really all one feud or not? But it's odd how it just perfectly makes one long stretch through that era's history.
Right.
And it seems to always kind of be the same attitudes between the two parties, and maybe that's just the thing of the era, like, hip-hop artists getting in feuds now. Like, there's probably plenty of hip-hop artists that you could go through the 90s and maybe make the same argument. There's this constant stretch of ongoing feuds, but I would also like to point out that probably all those artists all have the same production companies. So just saying that may be part of it. But I don't know. I think diving into the heart of this Harvey Nash stuff, and I mean, is Sidney part of it or not?
Probably gotta go read that Marsh McLuhan stuff and
Yep.
figure out what they're all saying, and comb through everything. But that's why you need to join the Apokalupsis Historia Patreon group. And like I said, starting a book club, we're gonna start reading the Arestia. I'll be posting the events, and we'll carve out 30 minutes, once a week or every other week, and we'll hop on and do a quick debrief or chat about what we just read, and then we'll continue on. So just more interaction, more reasons to read, something to keep us all on the schedule for something. And starting with something light and easy and foundational, I guess. Basanos, as I recently like to use those terms a lot now. But if there's without much further ado, I guess this will be the wrap up of this episode.
And real quick, I also want this is another thing I forgot. One of going back to Greek stuff, one of the big keywords that pops up in Plato's Symposium, the one with Socrates and all the other philosophers kind of arguing, this keyword that pops up over and over is this word basano, or basanios, which means touchstone. And it's like, touchstone, where have I heard that word before? Oh yeah, Shakespeare's As You Like It. That's the clown character, Touchstone. And Touchstone has this kind of famous phrase where he says, now I'm in Arden, which is an exact English translation of et Arcadia ego, except et Arden ego, and now I am in Arden, now I'm in Arcadia, which is from Sannazzaro's Arcadia, which is what Philip Sidney's totally remixing and remashing. And just want to give a quick shout out, speaking of remixing and remashing Arcadia, shout out to my buddy Ian for taking me to quote unquote a straight play. It's not what the term means, but it is what the term means. As opposed to the gay plays, as he and I joke, which are musicals. Straight play just meaning non-musical play. Arcadia by Tom Stoppard is a play from, 93? Seemingly nothing to do with Shakespeare, but oddly, it's this great little kind of discussion of the same ideas and discussions that happen in the Shakespeare authorship question, because it's about some people from current modern day time looking at this mansion that was owned by these aristocrats, and it ends up getting into this whole discussion about
Was Byron there and present? Did Byron write this one review and kind of set of poems? And it gets into a whole authorship question. And Byron, like Sidney, is a great historical poet, and like Sidney, has a very similar life story. And just in case you think I'm stretching it, it is called Arcadia. And
by Stoppard, who also does a famous Shakespeare extension with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern,
and also wrote Shakespeare in Love.
Yeah, and
but the setting of the Arcadia is set at a place called Sidley Park, and so I thought that was a little too close to Sydney for comfort. But clearly, Tom Stoppard's super well read in just every piece of literature ever, and it was a fantastic little play. And I know Tom Stoppard's a Stratfordian vanguard himself, but holy good God, that guy is talented. It kind of bothers me. So at some point, I'm gonna go deep down some more Tom Stoppard rabbit holes, because he's freaking good at writing. Thanks again, Ian, for taking me to that play. We're gonna go see Tom Stoppard's The Real Thing, January or February.
Just wanted to end on that note that, Touchstone is definitely coming from Socrates and Plato. And, who is supposed to be the guy that absolutely loves Plato? Sidney.
Who's quoting, because,
Who's quoting Sanazzaro.
He's quoting, he's also quoting the specific parts of Plato. He's also quoting Timaeus specifically.
Yeah, Timaeus,
whatever.
Yep.
He's using talking about poets and poesia and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But, go watch our defensive poetry videos. Yeah, we've got multiple videos on that breakdown now. But, from talking about a little bit of Nietzsche, Shakespeare, and Aeschylus, hope you've enjoyed this presentation. And sorry for a little bit of the mic troubles apparently we had tonight. But that's how it goes. Pretty sure we'll be touching on all this stuff again at some point. But, check out the links in the description below. Come join the Patreon group. And hope to see you all in the comments. And without anything else to add to that, we will just leave with our usual adage, nullius in verba.